May 17, 1957. This newspaper received reports late last night of a murder that may prove to be the catalyst for a full-scale war between Harlem's Negro crime organizations and the Italian Mafia families that control New York's underworld, according to multiple sources, including several eyewitnesses who spoke to this newspaper on condition of anonymity. Raymond Quick Lewis, a 34-year-old enforcer known to work for imprisoned Harlem crime boss Ellsworth, Bumpy Johnson, killed Anthony Ritchie, a 41-year-old soldier in the Genovese crime family, by cutting his throat outside the Lenox Social Club on 147th Street at approximately 11:30 p.m. on Thursday, May 16th. The killing, witnessed by at least 8 people, including 2 off-duty police officers, has sent shockwaves through both Harlem's criminal underworld and the Italian Mafia hierarchy that has controlled organized crime in New York for decades. To understand the significance of this murder, one must understand the current state of both Harlem's criminal economy and the power struggle currently consuming the Genovese crime family. For the past 15 years since the murder of Dutch Schultz in 1935, Harlem's numbers racket has been controlled by a unique arrangement between Negro operators led by Bumpy Johnson and the Italian Mafia families, primarily the Genovese organization formerly led by Charles Lucky Luciano. Under this arrangement, negotiated by Mr. Johnson himself, in 1935, Harlem's Negro bookmakers maintained operational independence while paying a percentage of their profits to the Italian families. This arrangement, unprecedented in American organized crime, allowed Negro operators to build wealth in their own community while providing the Italian families with substantial income from a territory they could not effectively control through direct occupation. However, this arrangement has been under severe strain since 1951, when Mr. Johnson was convicted of conspiracy to distribute heroin and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. He is currently serving his sentence at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco Bay, California. During Mr. Johnson's incarceration, his operations in Harlem have been managed by a small group of trusted associates, including the aforementioned Mr. Lewis, as well as William Jackson, Marcus Henderson, and John Davis. These men have maintained Mr. Johnson's interests and continued to honor the arrangement with the Italian families, paying the agreed-upon percentages and resolving disputes through established channels. However, the past 2 years have seen increasing tension as a power struggle within the Genovese family has created instability that directly affects Harlem's operations. Frank Costello, known throughout the underworld as the Prime Minister of the mob, has controlled the Genovese family since Lucky Luciano was deported to Italy in 1946. Mr. Costello, 66 years old, is known for his diplomatic approach to organized crime, preferring negotiation and political connections over violence. He has maintained cordial relations with Mr. Johnson and his Harlem associates, respecting the 1935 arrangement and generally allowing Harlem to operate with minimal interference. However, Mr. Costello's leadership has been challenged in recent years by Vito Genovese, 60, a more traditionally violent mobster who spent several years in Italy avoiding murder charges before returning to New York in 1945. Mr. Genovese believes that Mr. Costello has grown soft and that the Harlem arrangement allows too much independence to Negro operators who should be under direct Italian control. This power struggle came to a dramatic head-on May 2, 1957, just 2 weeks before the throat-slitting incident that has now sparked what sources describe as an inevitable war. On that evening, Vincent Gigante, a 28-year-old enforcer working for Mr. Genovese, shot Mr. Costello in the lobby of his apartment building at the Majestic on Central Park West. Mr. Costello survived the assassination attempt with a minor head wound, but the message was clear. Mr. Genovese was making his move to take control of the family. In the 2 weeks since that shooting, tension throughout New York's underworld has been extreme, with various factions trying to determine which side to support and what the consequences of this power struggle would be for their own operations. It is against this backdrop that Thursday night's killing must be understood, according to witnesses who spoke to this newspaper. The incident began when Anthony Ritchie, the Genovese soldier who would be killed, arrived at the Lenox Social Club, accompanied by 2 other Italian men identified as Michael Russo, 38, and Dominic Amato, 33. The Lenox Social Club is a known gathering place for Harlem's Negro crime. Figures and has historically been considered neutral territory where various parties could meet without fear of violence. The presence of 3 Italian mobsters at this location, particularly given the current tensions, immediately created concern among the club's patrons. Raymond Queek Lewis was present at the club that evening, along with William Jackson and approximately 15 other men and women. According to multiple witnesses, Mr. Ricci approached Mr. Lewis's table and demanded to speak with him privately. Mr. Lewis agreed, and the two men stepped outside onto the sidewalk in front of the club. What happened next is disputed, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. However, the essential facts are not in question. A physical altercation occurred between Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ricci. During this altercation, Mr. Lewis produced a straight razor and cut Mr. Ricci's throat with a single motion. Mr. Ricci collapsed on the sidewalk, bleeding profusely. He was transported to Harlem Hospital by ambulance, but was pronounced dead upon arrival at approximately 11:55 p.m. Mr. Lewis did not flee the scene. According to all witnesses, he remained standing over Mr. Ricci's body until police arrived approximately 4 minutes after the killing. He was arrested without resistance and charged with murder. He is currently being held without bail at the Tombs prison pending trial. The conflicting witness accounts centered on who initiated the physical confrontation and what words were exchanged before the violence began. Several witnesses who appear sympathetic to Mr. Lewis claim that Mr. Ricci physically grabbed Mr. Lewis and made threatening statements about what would happen to Harlem's Negro operators now that Mr. Genovese was taking control of the family. These witnesses state that Mr. Lewis acted in self-defense and that the throat slitting, while extreme, was a response to an immediate physical threat. However, other witnesses, including the two Italian men who accompanied Mr. Ricci, claim that Mr. Ricci merely wished to deliver a message about new payment arrangements and that Mr. Lewis attacked him without provocation, killing him in cold blood in front of multiple witnesses as a deliberate act of defiance against Italian authority. Police sources indicate that investigators are treating Mr. Lewis's claim of self-defense with skepticism, noting that producing a straight razor and cutting a man's throat with precision suggests rather than spontaneous self-defense. However, these same sources acknowledge that prosecuting the case will be extremely difficult, as most of the witnesses are affiliated with various criminal organizations and are unlikely to provide truthful testimony under oath. The more immediate concern for law enforcement is not the prosecution of Mr. Lewis, but the potential for widespread violence as the Genovese organization retaliates against Harlem's Negro operators. Commissioner Stephen Kennedy announced this morning that additional police officers are being deployed to Harlem and that the department is working to prevent an escalation into gang warfare. This newspaper has learned from sources within both the Harlem underworld and the Italian Mafia that the situation is far more complex than a simple murder case. According to these sources, Mr. Lewis's killing of Mr. Ricci was not a spontaneous act, but rather the result of careful calculation. Mr. Lewis, these sources say, believed that Mr. Ricci was there to deliver an ultimatum from Mr. Genovese, one that would effectively end the 1935 arrangement and place Harlem's numbers racket under direct Italian control. Rather than accept this ultimatum and report it to Mr. Johnson in Alcatraz for a decision on how to respond, Mr. Lewis chose to send an immediate and violent message. That message, according to these sources, was simple. Harlem would not accept Mr. Genovese's authority and would fight rather than surrender the independence that Mr. Johnson had negotiated 2 decades earlier. The question now facing both communities is whether this killing was authorized by Mr. Johnson from his prison cell or whether Mr. Lewis acted independently. Sources close to Mr. Johnson's Harlem organization insist that Mr. Lewis had explicit authorization to use violence if the Genovese faction attempted to change the 1935 arrangement. These sources claim that Mr. Johnson, despite being imprisoned, maintains communication with his associates through various channels and had given clear instructions on how to respond to any attempt by Mr. Genovese to assert control over Harlem. However, other sources suggest that Mr. Lewis exceeded his authority and that Mr. Johnson is currently furious at his enforcer for creating a situation that may result in a war that Harlem cannot win. The truth of these competing claims may not be known for some time. What is known is that the Genovese organization has already begun to respond. May 17, 1957, 4:15 a.m. The body of William Jackson, 39, one of Mr. Johnson's top associates and Mr. Lewis's closest friend, was discovered in an alley behind 152nd Street. Mr. Jackson had been shot 4 times in the chest and twice in the head. Police sources confirmed that the style of the killing, multiple shots to ensure death, followed by 2 additional shots to the head, is consistent with Italian Mafia execution methods. No witnesses have come forward, and no arrests have been made. However, sources within the underworld universally interpret this killing as the Genovese organization's first move in what will be an extended campaign of retaliation. The message, these sources say, is equally simple. Every man associated with Mr. Johnson will be hunted down and killed until Harlem surrenders or is destroyed. May 17, 1957, 2:30 p.m. This newspaper has learned that 2 more bodies were discovered this afternoon, bringing the death toll to 3 in less than 24 hours since Mr. Ritchie's throat was cut. Marcus Henderson, 42, and John Davis, 38, both known associates of Mr. Johnson, were found shot to death in a car on 145th Street. Both men showed signs of having been tortured before being killed. Police sources indicate that the torture included severe beatings and cigarette burns, suggesting that the killers were attempting to extract information, likely about Mr. Lewis's whereabouts and Mr. Johnson's other associates. The fact that both men were tortured before being killed indicates that the Genovese organization is not merely seeking revenge, but is attempting to completely dismantle Mr. Johnson's Harlem network while he is imprisoned and unable to personally direct his organization's response. Community reaction in Harlem has been one of fear mixed with a certain grim determination. Several Negro business owners and residents spoke to this newspaper this afternoon, most requesting anonymity. Their perspectives reflect the impossible position in which Harlem's law-abiding citizens find themselves. One shopkeeper stated, "We don't want war in our streets. We don't want our children dodging bullets. But at the same time, we understand why Quick Lewis did what he did. The Italians think they can take everything from us. Now that Bumpy's locked up, they think we'll just roll over and accept whatever they decide. Quick showed them different. Now we're all going to pay the price. But at least we went down fighting." Another resident, a 48-year-old woman who works as a nurse, expressed pure frustration. "This is what happens when the law doesn't protect us. When the only people standing between us and white gangsters taking everything are other gangsters. Bumpy Johnson is a criminal. But he's our criminal. He kept us independent. Now he's in prison, and the Italians think Harlem is theirs for the taking." What choice did Quick Lewis have? May 18, 1957. This newspaper can now confirm that the death toll has reached 7, with 4 more murders discovered overnight. The victims have been identified as Samuel Brooks, 36, Theodore Wright, 41, Robert Miller, 33, and James Washington, 38. All 4 men were known to be part of Mr. Johnson's Harlem organization, working as numbers, runners, collectors, and enforcers. All 4 were shot execution style, with multiple wounds to the chest and head. All 4 showed signs of torture before death. The systematic nature of these killings suggests that the Genovese organization is working from a list of targets, and will continue this campaign until every man connected to Mr. Johnson is either dead or has fled Harlem. Police Commissioner Kennedy held a press conference this afternoon, acknowledging that the department is facing what he described as an organized campaign of murder, and that preventing further deaths will require resources the department does not currently have available. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that Mr. Johnson's organization appears unable to mount an effective defense, with Mr. Johnson imprisoned in Alcatraz, with Mr. Lewis in custody at the Tombs awaiting trial for murder, and with Mr. Jackson, Mr. Henderson, and Mr. Davis all dead. The leadership structure of Harlem's largest criminal organization has been completely decapitated. The remaining members of Mr. Johnson's network, primarily low-level runners and collectors, are terrified and have largely gone into hiding. Sources within Harlem indicate that the numbers game, which typically generates hundreds of thousands of dollars in weekly revenue, has completely shut down. Policy banks are closed. Collectors are not making their rounds. Bettors cannot place their wagers. The entire economic structure that Mr. Johnson built over 2 decades is collapsing in real time. The question that has dominated discussion both in Harlem and in law enforcement circles is whether Mr. Johnson can exert any control over this situation from his prison cell. This newspaper has learned from sources familiar with the federal prison system that inmates at Alcatraz are allowed extremely limited communication with the outside world. Telephone calls are not permitted, letters are heavily censored, and can take weeks to arrive. Visits from family members must be approved in advance and are strictly supervised. However, these same sources acknowledge that determined inmates have historically found ways to communicate with associates on the outside, often through coded messages and letters, or information passed through visiting family members. Whether Mr. Johnson has been able to communicate with his remaining associates in Harlem, and what instructions he may have given them, remains unknown. May 19, 1957. This newspaper has learned that an extraordinary meeting took place early this morning in an attempt to prevent further bloodshed. According to multiple sources with knowledge of the meeting, Frank Costello, despite having survived an assassination attempt just 2 weeks ago and despite currently being engaged in his own war with Vito Genovese for control of the family, sent emissaries to Harlem to negotiate a ceasefire. The emissaries, identified as Thomas Aboli and Anthony, both longtime Costello loyalists, met with the remaining members of Mr. Johnson's organization at an undisclosed location in Harlem. The meeting, these sources say, lasted approximately 2 hours and covered both the immediate crisis and the longer-term arrangement between Harlem's Negro operators and the Italian families. According to sources who were briefed on the meeting's outcome, Mr. Costello's emissaries delivered a straightforward message. The killing of Anthony Ricci was an act of war, and under normal circumstances, the Genovese family would be justified in completely destroying Mr. Johnson's organization in retaliation. However, Mr. Costello argued, these are not normal circumstances. The current power struggle within the family means that Mr. Genovese's actions are not supported by all factions of the organization. Mr. Costello, despite his weakened position following the assassination attempt, still commands significant loyalty, and he believes that the 1935 arrangement with Harlem should be honored regardless of who ultimately controls the family. Therefore, Mr. Costello proposed a solution if Mr. Johnson's remaining associates would publicly acknowledge that Raymond Quick Lewis acted without authorization, if they would agree to substantial financial compensation for Mr. Ricci's family, and if they would reaffirm their commitment to the 1935 arrangement and the payment structure it established, then Mr. Costello would use his remaining influence to call off Mr. Genovese's campaign of retaliation. The response from Mr. Johnson's associates was reportedly one of relief, mixed with skepticism. These men understood that accepting Mr. Costello's terms was their only realistic path to survival. However, they also understood that making commitments on behalf of Mr. Johnson, who is imprisoned and unable to personally approve such agreements, was extremely risky. If Mr. Johnson disagreed with their decision once he learned of it, he could order their deaths for exceeding their authority. If Mr. Costello proved unable to control Mr. Genovese's faction, accepting these terms would accomplish nothing except to make them appear weak. Nevertheless, faced with the alternative of continued slaughter, Mr. Johnson's associates agreed to Mr. Costello's terms. They publicly stated that Mr. Lewis had acted independently and without authorization, that his killing of Mr. Ricci was not sanctioned by Mr. Johnson or his organization, and that they would pay $50,000 to Mr. Ricci's widow as compensation for his death. Whether this agreement will end, the violence remains to be seen. As of this afternoon, May 19th, no additional bodies have been discovered. However, sources within both communities expressed doubt that Mr. Genovese will honor any agreement negotiated by Mr. Costello. Mr. Genovese, these sources say, sees this entire situation as an opportunity to accomplish two goals simultaneously. First, to demonstrate that Mr. Costello is weak and ineffective, unable to control even his own subordinates. Second, to break the 1935 arrangement and bring Harlem under direct Italian control, thereby increasing the family's revenue and eliminating the unique independence that Negro operators have enjoyed for over 2 decades. For Mr. Genovese, this crisis is not a problem to be solved, but rather an opportunity to be exploited. This newspaper has also learned that Mr. Johnson has been informed of the situation and has managed to communicate his response, though the exact method of communication remains unclear. Sources who claim to have received messages from Mr. Johnson indicate that he is furious with Mr. Lewis for acting without explicit authorization, but that he supports the agreement negotiated by his associates with Mr. Costello. Mr. Johnson reportedly understands that his organization was on the verge of complete destruction and that accepting Mr. Costello's terms, while humiliating, was the only realistic option. However, these same sources indicate that Mr. Johnson has also sent a second message, this one directed at Mr. Genovese. The message, according to these sources, is that Mr. Johnson is currently imprisoned, but will not remain imprisoned forever. He is scheduled for potential parole in 1963, just 6 years from now. When he returns to Harlem, he will remember every man who was killed during his absence. He will remember who ordered those killings, and he will respond accordingly. May 21st, 1957. This newspaper can now confirm that the violence has ended, at least temporarily. No additional murders have been reported since May 18th. The $50,000 payment to Mr. Ritchie's widow has been delivered. Raymond Quicklewis remains in custody at the Tombs, and his trial for murder is scheduled for September 1957. Legal experts suggest that despite the circumstances of the killing, Mr. Lewis faces an extremely difficult defense, given the number of witnesses who saw him cut Mr. Ritchie's throat. He is likely to be convicted and may face the death penalty. However, sources within the underworld suggest that various parties, including possibly Mr. Costello himself, may attempt to influence the trial outcome through bribery or intimidation of witnesses and jurors. The ultimate fate of Mr. Lewis may depend less on the evidence against him and more on the ongoing power struggle within the Genovese family. The broader implications of this week's events are still being assessed by both law enforcement and the criminal underworld. On one level, the crisis appears to have been resolved through Mr. Costello's diplomatic intervention and the willingness of Mr. Johnson's associates to accept humiliating terms to end the violence. However, on a deeper level, this crisis has exposed fundamental weaknesses in Mr. Johnson's Harlem organization. His imprisonment has created a power vacuum that his associates are unable to fill. His absence means that quick decisions must be made by men who lack his authority and strategic vision. And perhaps most importantly, the crisis has demonstrated that the 1935 arrangement, which has governed Harlem's criminal economy for over 2 decades, may not survive Mr. Johnson's imprisonment. If Mr. Genovese successfully takes control of the family, as many observers expect he eventually will, the agreement negotiated by Mr. Costello may prove worthless. For Harlem's Negro community, the lessons of this week are bitter. The fragile independence that Mr. Johnson negotiated in 1935, the ability to operate their own numbers banks and keep most of their profits in their own community, has been shown to depend entirely on Mr. Johnson's personal authority and his relationships with Italian mob leaders who respected him. Without Mr. Johnson present to defend Harlem's interests, the community is vulnerable to exploitation by white gangsters who see Negro operators as subordinates rather than partners. The death of 7 men in 3 days has driven home the reality that Harlem's independence exists only at the sufferance of more powerful forces, and that sufferance can be withdrawn at any moment. The criminal justice system, for its part, has once again proven largely ineffective at preventing gang violence or prosecuting those responsible. Despite 7 murders in 3 days, despite multiple witnesses, despite the systematic nature of the killings, police have made no arrests beyond Mr. Lewis himself. The killers who tortured and murdered Mr. Jackson, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Davis, and the 4 other victims remain free. Commissioner Kennedy acknowledged this afternoon that without witnesses willing to testify and without cooperation from the communities affected by these crimes, solving gang murders is nearly impossible. He urged Harlem residents to come forward with information, but acknowledged that fear of retaliation makes such cooperation unlikely. The effective result is that the Genovese organization has killed 7 men with complete impunity, sending a message that violence against Mr. Johnson's associates will not result in legal consequences. As Harlem attempts to return to some semblance of normalcy, the numbers game has slowly begun to resume operations. Policy banks are reopening. Collectors are cautiously making their rounds. Bettors are placing their wagers. However, the atmosphere is fundamentally changed. The confidence that characterized Harlem's criminal economy under Mr. Johnson's leadership has been replaced by anxiety and uncertainty. No one knows how long the current ceasefire will last. No one knows whether Mr. Genovese will honor the agreement negotiated by Mr. Costello. and no one knows what will happen when Mr. Johnson is eventually released from Alcatraz and returns to Harlem seeking revenge for the 7 men killed while he was unable to protect them. The blood that Raymond Quick-Lewis spilled outside the Lenox Social Club on May 16th has indeed started a war. That war may be paused, but it is far from over. The final chapter will be written when Bumpy Johnson walks out of Alcatraz and returns to the streets that have defined his life. Until then, Harlem waits.